My parents stole my wedding fund to pay for my brother's college. Growing up, I always knew my parents favored my brother Danny. He was the golden boy of the family, the one who got praised for every small achievement while I was left to fend for myself. He was athletic, charming, and endlessly adored, and I was the independent one. That's how they framed it to justify their lack of attention toward me. While Danny had every possible resource handed to him, I worked twice as hard to get even a fraction of the recognition. But I never resented him. It wasn't his fault. He didn't ask for this kind of treatment, and despite the blatant favoritism, we had always been close as siblings. Still, I never imagined their favoritism would go so far as to sabotage one of the most important moments of my life. It was a Sunday evening, just a few months before my wedding. I had invited my parents over for dinner, eager to show them my wedding plans. After years of saving, sacrificing luxuries, and meticulously planning, I had finally managed to put together enough money to create the wedding of my dreams. My grandparents had also pitched in generously, giving me a sizable contribution because they wanted my day to be magical. Everything was falling into place: the venue, the dress, the catering, the decor. It was going to be perfect. I had barely finished serving dessert when my mom casually dropped the bombshell. "We had to use your wedding fund," she said, her tone so nonchalant you'd think she was telling me she borrowed a few dollars for groceries. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What?" I asked, the fork in my hand clattering onto my plate. "For Danny's tuition," my dad added, not even looking up from his phone. It was as though the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mind raced, trying to process what they were saying. "You took my wedding fund?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The money I saved? The money Grandma and Grandpa gave me? You took it all?" "Yes, we used it for Danny's education," my mom said, her voice carrying a note of impatience. "You're still young, you can always have a smaller wedding. But Danny's education is more important right now." Smaller wedding? I repeated, my voice rising. "After all the time and effort I've put into planning? After everything Grandma and Grandpa did to help? Do you even hear yourselves?" My dad sighed, setting his phone down as though I were inconveniencing him. "Look, Danny got into a prestigious university. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. A wedding is just one day." "Are you serious?" I snapped, my hands trembling with anger. I stormed out of the dining room, retreating to the kitchen to collect my thoughts. My head was spinning, and my chest felt tight with anger and disbelief. They didn't even apologize. They didn't even ask. They had just decided, without a second thought, that my dreams were less important than my brother's education. And now they had the audacity to paint me as selfish for being upset? After a few minutes, I went back to face them. "This isn't just about money," I said, my voice trembling. "This is about respect. You've shown me time and time again that I'm not as important as Danny. You've always favored him, but this is a new low." My dad stood up, clearly annoyed. "We're done talking about this. What's done is done. You can figure out a different plan for your wedding." And just like that, they left, leaving me to sit alone in the wreckage of my carefully built plans. The next morning, I couldn't let it go. I had to know how my brother fit into all of this. Danny and I had always been close, and I wanted to believe he hadn't been part of this betrayal. So, I called him and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I didn't waste any time. "Did you know Mom and Dad took my wedding fund to pay for your tuition?" I asked, watching his face closely. His eyes widened in shock. "What? No. They did what?" "They used all the money I'd been saving for my wedding, all of it, to pay for your university fees," I said, my voice cracking. "Grandma and Grandpa's contribution, too." Danny's face fell, and I could see the guilt wash over him. "I had no idea," he said, shaking his head. "They told me they'd figured out the tuition and not to worry about it. I never asked for their help. I swear, if I'd known, I wouldn't have let them do this." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for a moment, my anger shifted. It wasn't his fault. He hadn't asked for this, and now he was stuck in the middle of a mess our parents had created. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly. I don't know, I admitted, tears welling up in my eyes. I worked so hard for that money. I gave up vacations, nights out, new clothes, everything, to save for my dream wedding. And now it's gone, just like that. How do I even begin to fix this? Danny was quiet for a moment, then said, I'll talk to them. I'll tell them to figure out a way to pay you back. But I knew it wasn't that simple. My parents weren't exactly swimming in money, and even if they somehow came up with the funds, it wouldn't change what they'd done. It wouldn't erase the betrayal. Over the next few days, I tried to come up with a plan. I considered scaling back the wedding, but every time I thought about cutting corners, it felt like another piece of my dream was slipping away. My grandparents had given me that money because they wanted me to have something special, something unforgettable. How could I face them and tell them it was all gone? I finally decided to confront my parents one last time. If they wouldn't give me the money back, they at least owed me an explanation and an apology. When I showed up at their house, they looked surprised to see me. What are you doing here? My mom asked, her tone wary. I need to talk to you, I said, stepping inside. And I'm not leaving until you hear me out. They exchanged glances but didn't say anything, so I continued. You've always favored Danny. I've accepted that. But this is beyond unfair. You didn't just take money. You took my dreams, my hard work, my plans. And you didn't even ask me. How could you do that? My mom crossed her arms defensively. We did what we thought was best for the family. You'll understand someday when you have kids of your own. I shook my head, my frustration boiling over. No, I won't. Because I would never do to my child what you've done to me. This wasn't your decision to make. It wasn't your money to take. And now, because of you, I have to pick up the pieces of a wedding I might not even be able to afford anymore. Enough, my dad said, his voice firm. We're not going to sit here and be lectured by you. What's done is done. Move on. And just like that, they dismissed me again, as if my feelings didn't matter, as if I didn't matter. I left their house more hurt and angry than ever, realizing that I couldn't rely on them for anything, not support, not respect, not even basic decency. In the weeks that followed, I poured my energy into rebuilding my wedding plans. It wasn't easy, but I was determined not to let their betrayal ruin my happiness. My grandparents, bless them, stepped in to help again, though I hated having to explain why the original fund was gone. They were furious with my parents but told me to focus on moving forward. Danny, true to his word, tried to make things right. He took on extra shifts at his part-time job and insisted on giving me whatever he could spare. I didn't want to take his money, but he wouldn't hear it. You deserve this, he said. I can't undo what they did, but I can try to help. Eventually, the wedding day arrived. It wasn't the extravagant affair I'd initially envisioned, but it was beautiful in its own way. Surrounded by my friends, my grandparents, and the family I had chosen for myself, I felt a sense of peace. My parents were there, but I barely acknowledged them. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. Looking back, their betrayal taught me a painful but valuable lesson. Sometimes, family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who respect you, and who value your happiness as much as their own. And while my parents may never understand the hurt they caused, I've learned to stand up for myself and fight for what I deserve. In the end, that strength was worth more than any wedding fund could ever be.